It's 7 o'clock, so perhaps we can get started. Welcome to today's meeting of the Place and Economic Committee. My name is Councillor Lucy Hodgson, and I'm the chair of the committee. If the alarm sounds, the premise must be evacuated immediately. Do not spend time collecting personal belongings. All emergency escape routes are clearly signed, and once you've left the building, the assembly point is on the High Street opposite the Guildhall. This is a public meeting, and members of the public and press are permitted to report on the proceedings. Reporting includes filming, photography, making an audio recording and providing commentary on proceedings. Please note this meeting is recorded and streamed live, and these recordings are published on the relevant meeting pages of the council's website. By choosing to attend this public meeting, you are deemed to have given your consent to being filmed or recorded, and for any footage to be broadcast or published. Members and other speakers are reminded to use their microphones when speaking. So, appointments of substitutes.
There are no substitutes, Chair.
And declarations of interest. Are there any? Adrian? Okay. Public participation.
There's no public participation.
So the minutes of the last meeting. So this was sent separately to the agenda. So page 1 for accuracy, page 1, page 2, page 3, and page 4. Okay, I have got, yes.
I'm not questioning the accuracy. I'd just like to ask the question. We've been given a reply here about the City of Culture, and it just says that that it's not been an agenda item for any officer or member meeting. But that doesn't answer the question as to where and by whom was the decision made. Was it just a leader decision? Was it an MD decision? Or you know, who?
Yes. David.
Thank you, Chair. As far as I'm aware, there has been no decision. It is not formed an item at any meeting that I'm aware of. I've checked with a couple of officers just in case the subject has passed me by. Sometimes they do, but I'm not aware in this case of it being an item at any meeting. So I can't. There has been no decision whether to apply or not apply in recently. Thank you.
I think it was the newspaper then making that decision for us, because it was reported in the Worcester News that Worcester would not be applying for it. So where they got that information from, I don't know.
I'm afraid I don't know either.
There are another some other matters arising, and you each, I think, got a piece of paper with the answers to certain questions that have been raised. If anybody else has got any more questions about this, perhaps they can ask the relevant officers. Okay. Right, so then we go on to the local development scheme, and just before I get Corinne to speak on this matter. There is just one recommendation that hasn't been confirmed, and this is to go to council for the final recommendation. So, Corinne.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, councillors. Yes, this item is the local development scheme 2021 to 2024, which is a requirement of the Planning and Compulsory Purchase Act 2004 as amended. The local development scheme has two main purposes: to inform the public about the preparation and adoption of planning documents, and to establish and reflect council priorities and enable work programmes to be set for the preparation of the documents. It's good practice to update the local development scheme on an annual basis, and the work programme operates on a 3-year cycle. So this update of the local development scheme for Worcester City, each council, the South Worcestershire Council, will produce their own local development scheme. They all are broadly similar in terms of these updates. This update for Worcester City features updates on the South Worcester Development Plan timetable, the Travellers and Travelling Show People DPD timetable. There's other updates relating to neighbourhood planning in South Worcestershire and Worcester County Council matters updates in relation to mineral and waste planning. And there's also updates relating to the statement of community involvement in terms of COVID measures that have been in place. So the SWDP review timetable, the current iteration of the local development scheme, which is October 2020, scheduled the next stage of the SWDP review, the publication version, Regulation 19, for October-November 2021. Now, unfortunately, this is no longer possible due to principally key evidence-based updates relating to infrastructure and viability that are still outstanding, which requires further time to complete. So the updated timetable factors in the additional time to carry out this work. And it's also worth noting that it reflects and provides allowances for the PERDA period at Worcester City for local elections next year. So accordingly, the SWDP timetable has been updated as follows. The publication Regulation 19 consultation will now be held in July and August 2022. We're then hoping to submit the SWDP in November, and then, all being well, subject to planning inspectorate scheduling and availability, we are hoping that the examination will take place in around February to May 2023. With the receipt of the inspector's report and adoption to follow in 2023, that's obviously subject to the planning inspectorate scheduling and availability. So moving on to the Travellers and Travelling Show People DPD, this has been prepared in relation to policy SWDP 17 of the current adopted SWDP, and is not dependent on the SWDP review timetable and progress I've just outlined. And this updated timetable will not be affected by PERDA next year. So the Travellers DPD, the revised timetable is the publication, public consultation in January to February of 2022, with submission to the planning inspectorate in June 2022, and then, as with the SWDP, the timetable from then on is contingent on scheduling and availability. But hopefully, if the timetable is broadly in line with what we've set out in the local development scheme, we're looking at adoption in summer of 2023 for the Travellers and Travelling Show People DPD. And as I mentioned, the other updates related to the LDS feature the statement of community involvement and the removal of the temporary COVID-19 procedures and measures we've had in place recently. And there are updates relating to neighbourhood planning progress in South Worcestershire, as well as updates relating to Worcester County Council matters, specifically minerals local plan. So as the chair mentioned, I'd like to just slightly update the recommendations for this item. So I'll just read them out for clarity. Item 1, that the committee recommend that the council approve the local development scheme 2021 to 2024 set out in Appendix 1 to come into effect from the 1st of October. And item 2, the delegated authority is given to Corporate Director of Planning and Governance in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair of Place and Economic Development Committee to make minor amendments to the local development scheme prior to publication. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? No? Right, so the recommendation that is put towards so that the development local development scheme 2021 to 2024 is set down on the appendix and comes into effect on the 1st of October 2021. That delegated authority is given to the Corporate Director, Planning and Governance in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair of this committee to make a minor amendments and to the then local development scheme is then brought to full council. So are we in agreement? Agreed? Right. So now we have the South Worcestershire 5-year land supply. I think again, Corinne.
Chair. So the 5-year housing land supply update 2021 to 2026. Local authorities are required to maintain a 5-year housing land supply as the requirements of the National Planning Policy Framework. The adopted 2016 South Worcester Development Plan established 5 separate sub-areas for dealing with housing provision. But as the current adopted plan is now more than 5 years old, the South Worcester councils are required to use the government's standard method calculation in establishing the 5-year housing land supply. As part of the SWDP review, the South Worcester councils are moving to a combined South Worcestershire 5-year housing land supply as opposed to individual local authority calculations. And it's worth noting that the South Worcester councils already do this for the purposes of reporting on our housing delivery tests. So the approach to doing this is already somewhat established through that method. So as per table 1 in the on the agenda item, you can see that the standard method calculation comes out at the South Worcestershire councils requiring 1,283 dwellings per annum. And in calculating the 5-year housing land supply for South Worcestershire, due to historic surplus delivery in previous years, there is a current oversupply against the 5-year target, and this has been offset against that requirement. So this has resulted in a lower delivery requirement for the 5 years. But it's worth also noting that a cautious approach has been taken when considering sites for inclusion within the 5-year housing land supply. And working the calculation through with all our commitments and planning permissions that we've included in the supply, as well as a buffer for non-delivery, the outcome for this 5-year housing land supply period is 5.76 years for a South Worcestershire wide calculation. So the recommendations are as in the on the paper. I can read those out just for clarity. So so item 1, that the publication of the South Worcestershire Council's 5-year housing land supply report and appendices on the 22nd of September 2021, which details that officers consider for the period 1st of April 2021 to 31st of March 2026, a robust 5-year housing land supply against the standard method housing requirement can be demonstrated. And the second recommendation, that Place and Economic Development Committee note that on account of the South Worcestershire Council being able to demonstrate the 5-year housing land supply, all policies in the South Worcestershire Development Plan relating to the supply of housing should be given full weight in the determination of planning applications, excluding the elements of SWDP 3, which are no longer appropriate given the utilisation of the standard method housing requirement and associated change in approach to 5-year housing land supply. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Go.
Thank you. In the document, on page 38, there's a paragraph on addressing past oversupply and discounting a certain number because of our surplus provision. Would that stand up to appeal if there should be an appeal against that calculation? Are we certain that that calculation is foolproof?
Karen?
It's worth noting that this 5-year housing land supply calculation has yet to be tested at any appeal, so it's worth noting that there is that risk, I suppose, that should we be challenged on our method and we are found that an inspector does not approve of that method, we may have to reconsider. But at the moment, we consider that this is as a South Worcestershire collective, I should add, that this is a robust calculation that we are willing to defend that appeal.
Can I just follow that with what would happen? What's our fallback position? Should we not be successful in defending that?
In the event that we're not successful, we would have to relook at the 5-year housing land supply calculation and see what position as South Worcestershire Council we are in, and whether we do still have a 5-year housing land supply or not. It would depend on other variables, such as we would probably be moving into a new monitoring year, so we might have additional commitments to factor in that we can use to boost the supply. So it would depend on the timing of when, if and when said appeal would come through, what we'd have to reassess our position to see where we are at that point.
Pat?
Thank you, Chair. Corinne, I'm thinking that it might be possible to find out what the smoke signals are on this issue in advance of the examination public. Presume that could be something we could do.
Well, in terms of demonstrating a 5-year housing land supply specifically for a local plan examination, that is something that we would actively be presenting at the examination to determine that we do have a 5-year housing land supply based on our local plan and the sites we have allocated within it. So we should be at that stage when we come to examination that we can demonstrate that.
That wasn't quite my question in a way. My idea was that we could possibly sound out the powers that be about our calculations in advance of the examination public.
We have written to MHCLG in terms of our 5-year housing land supply, and as I understand it, we've yet to have a response, or we've had a non-response, if you will, in terms of the questions asked. So we don't have a set answer at this stage in terms of if you're referring to sort of how we've calculated the supply. But like I said, as officers in the 3 councils, we collectively consider this to be a robust approach.
Well, you're usually right. Let's hope, fingers crossed.
Simon?
Thank you, Chair. Just really happy to endorse this, I think, this suggestion from officers, because having read the document carefully, it's clear that officers have gone through very carefully the sites that are likely to come through. So an example, even sites that are in the plan that proposed to come through and very clearly are going to be ones that we expect to see. They've discounted many of those because they won't be delivered within timescale. And I do take the point that obviously we're always there is a degree of risk, isn't it, when you're relying on the independent examination as to whether that's going to be sound robust. But the important thing is the supporting evidence and a proportionate, sensible approach to each of those. And I think there have been a very considered approach to in relation to this document. So I'm happy to support it, and obviously wish it well in terms of its journey for further endorsement.
I certainly know that a lot of time and effort has been gone into this, so that we are as robust as we can be, and certainly in the joint advisory panel as well. We've tried to make it as real as possible. So, any other questions? No. So I won't read out the recommendations again. But do we do a vote in favour of this? That's great. So, HMO Advertising. Thank you, Corinne. HMO Advertising Board, which I think is Sem.
Thank you, Chair. This matter arises from a council meeting on the 23rd of February when there was concern raised regarding site to-let boards associated with houses and multiple occupation within a number of wards within the authority, and pointed out that an awful lot of people now go online to look at these properties rather than going out on the street and actually looking for the sale of these to-let boards, and the issue of them being visually intrusive, and particularly in certain areas, just the general high number of them, which is causing a lot of clutter and visual harm. In response to that, we have looked at this issue, and basically, as a very quick outline, as said within the report, advertisements fall into two categories: those with express consent and those with deemed consent. And deemed consent, like permitted development, the signs that do not require advertisement consent, and to-let boards fall within that category. There are certain requirements with them that have to be removed within a certain period of time. But basically, if you're selling your property or you're letting your property, you can put one of these to-let or for sale signs out your property without requiring advertisement consent. The issue that's being touched on here is twofold, actually. Is firstly the proliferation within certain areas of high numbers of to-let boards, particularly, and secondly, there's an issue of lack or needing to pursue breaches of legislation where the signboards have been up for too long and should be removed, which is exacerbating this issue. In terms of the first point, which is there any way of stopping the advertisement board being put up to actually remove the clutter? There are provisions within the legislation for us to serve a Regulation 7 order under the advertisement regulations. But in doing so, what we can't do is we either remove the deemed consent for these types of boards for all advertisements, so to-let and for sale, or we wouldn't, as an authority, want to be seen to be identifying one specific part of the housing sector for obvious reasons. So it would be very difficult for us to do that. And also, to be honest, we would struggle. These orders have to go in front of the Secretary of State, and it's unlikely that the Secretary of State would accept us highlighting removal of to permitted development rights or deemed consent for to let boards, but allowing for sale boards to remain. So it is difficult to do that, to actually remove that, and we wouldn't be able to differentiate. So ultimately, if we serve the regulation 7 on an area, what it would do is it would remove the deemed consent rights for all advertisements for sale and to let. And if you were selling your property in the area, you'd have to apply for advertisement consent before you could put the sale board up. And so with the properties letting as well. So everyone would be treated the same and all have to apply for advertisement consents. That actually has quite a big impact upon planning, because if we were to do that, then we'd have a significant increase in the number of advertisement consent applications coming in. And because we've removed the deemed consent permission, we wouldn't be able to charge a fee for it. So we get more applications in, and it would also result in no fee. So it'd be a real cost to the council in doing that. And it would, everyone selling the property and to let would all have to be treated precisely the same, which is something that wasn't looked on particularly favourably. It does move us into the second area, which is that in an awful lot of areas, and from experience across the country, to let boards are notoriously a problem, because what basically happens is you get certain areas which have high numbers of HMOs within them. The to let boards go up, but even when they've let the properties, they don't remove those to let boards. And basically what happens is you end up with a proliferation in an area because there's high numbers of HMOs, and then the sale boards just don't go. Now they are temporary in nature, so within after 14 days of it being let, they should be removed. If they're not removed, then we do have powers to serve a removal notice on them. And if it's on a structure like a sale board sign, to let board sign, we can serve notice in 22 days. We can go along and take it down. The other issue of advertisement consent is when advert is in breach of the advertisement legislation and regulations, it is actually deemed to be, or we can treat it as an authority as illegal. It's a criminal offence, and we could pursue a prosecution there. So having regard to the difficulties of trying to apply Regulation 7 order and the limitations that brings, it's either all or nothing. What we've looked at doing is actually, as part of the recommendation, is to, rather than to pursue the Regulation 7, is to take a more proactive approach and approach the letting agencies. It's not the landlords, it's the letting agencies who aren't removing these to let boards, and actively work with them using our enforcement officer. We have appointed, in the process of appointing an additional enforcement assistant to help in this, to actually approach them, to point out what they need to do, when they need to remove them, and actually make it clear that unless they do remove them, we will actually take them down. We will be serving orders on them, and actually, obviously, where there's repeat offences taking place, then we would be investigating the expediency of taking action against them from a prosecution perspective. On Appendix 2, you do actually have a copy of the letter that we were looking to send out to the agents, which is basically outlining what the requirements are and basically advising that we would be looking to actively pursue this. So the recommendation in front of you is actually that we don't pursue the Regulation 7, and we don't try to change the enforcement policy, because the enforcement policy does actually work effectively having regard to the legislation, but to take a more proactive approach with the letter and going to the agents and the letting agencies and actually explaining to them that we will be looking at this, and we will be asking to remove the advertisements at the end of the 14 days following the let. And the beauty of it is that we can actually easily do that, because you can actually phone them up and ask them, is the property still available? If they say it's not, then we know that it's not available anymore. So the enforcement officer then the clock starts ticking. So we have the resources coming forward, and we have a approach of how to deal with this issue. And therefore, that's a recommendation we're putting forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I've just got two questions. Is it citywide? Certainly, I know of at least one house in London Villages where it's obviously an HMO, and their sign is almost permanently up, and also other areas as well. And also, is it just one house, or is it a street where the number of to let signs is displayed? And then I've got Simon.
In relation to the regulation, if you were to seek that, that would be certainly an area based, but it could be for the whole of the authority, which would be unusual, but you could. But in terms of the recommendation, we would be looking to send it to all agents who operate within the area. So we can do a trawl of everyone who's letting premises and send this letter out to them, because they're easy to find. And that would be across the whole of the authority. So where people where these agencies weren't removing these sale boards, then we'd certainly be looking not just to pursue in on an area basis, the whole of the authority, because if they're breaching in one of the villages and in various streets, and it's the same person who's doing that, then that's the person, then we would be looking at a cumulative thing and looking to prosecute, because they would be deemed to be a repeat offender.
Thank you, Chair. There's somebody who seconded the original motion, and we accepted, myself and my colleague, the amendment. I think this is necessary but not sufficient to discharge what we were looking for for council to come back to PED. Why I say it's necessary but not sufficient is clearly informing landlords and letting agents of the provisions that exist and what they should be doing is good practice, and I'd absolutely encourage it. But I think we've got to accept that within Worcester, and particularly parts of Worcester City, we've got a proliferation of letting agents or landlords that clearly know their signs are up for a long period of time. They know what the regulations are, and they've maintained those signs for months, if not years on end. And I wouldn't name those individual properties or companies, because that wouldn't be fair to them. They wouldn't be able to defend themselves here or now. But I do think we need to be more robust, Chair. I would suggest that whilst of course we inform people what the regulations are and what good practice is, we need to maybe consider a further report at a further meeting of the committee. Just look at what more we can be doing, because I think what we need to establish is a baseline. How many signs are up, so that we can actually proactively operate our policy, we can enforce it, we can make those contacts. So we're not relying just on the list of things we've got or the agents we've got, but we actually see just how prolific the signs are within Worcester City. And I know in St John's and St Clements what the situation is, because we're very active members, we go around and we see that. But as the Chair herself is highlighting, that there is a more general problem in other areas that might be of a lower nature, but still very impactful on those communities. So I think some form of audit of where the signs are, who's got those signs up, and then we can actually evidence that how long they've had them up for, if you see what I mean, I think is important. But the other thing is, what the motion was seeking was to proactively work for alternatives, because we're in a digital age now. These boards are old-fashioned and unnecessary. We've heard from students, from the student union, which we spoke to, that this isn't the way students go about accessing property. So whilst it's a form of advertisement to compete, if you like, for landlords against each other in terms of properties, actually what students do is go online. So they use online methods. And so I think this is something that we want to encourage providers to phase out, not simply to comply with the regulations, but to look to embrace the more modern ways of seeking to get accommodation. And I'd like to see, as part of a future report, what we're doing with University of Worcester, other parts of the sector, to actually look at more modern ways. So over time, we reduce the proliferation of these boards, which clearly do send a signal to the community about the types of properties. They might have a negative association. They're undesirable to identify individual properties in that way. And I think that would be useful. It would certainly enhance the city. So my encouragement to the committee is, yes, of course, let's write out to people, but let's have a further report to see how more proactive we can be. And let's track the performance of this. Let's see whether, once we know the baseline, how many of these properties are removing the signs, how many are having further action, how many people are we having to enforce, and ultimately, are we having to prosecute anyone? Because I think that would give confidence to members, particularly members who are highly affected by these signs, that we're taking as robust an action as we can do, Madam Chairman, as an authority.
James.
Thank you, Chair. I'd echo the point that Simon has made. I mean, if colleagues are minded to endorse the recommendation, we simply do have to come back to this at some point to investigate the efficacy of basically of what we're endorsing. There are a number of people who have spoken this and other meetings about the way that this disfigures the landscape. We've visited that. We know that there's a lot of evidence to substantiate that feeling. If the feeling is that the present sort of structure gives us that bite, if you like, then okay, let's go down that route. But we need to bring this back to this committee at an appropriate time to make sure that it's doing exactly what it says on the tin, essentially. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. I remember the discussion at Council on this matter, and it was predominantly about the concerns of one area of the city and the aesthetics of whether some of the signs were garish or in the way, or too many of them. And we ended up with this this motion, which is doesn't address some key issues across the city. It still, in answer to your question, it still seems to focus in one area of the city and nowhere else. And given that we've only got one and maybe soon 1.5 enforcement officers, what priorities are going to be given to the whole city? And I would come back to another point, which is really the capacity issue of having one enforcement officer. Time after time again, we get complaints about the sorts of enforcement or the lack of enforcement in this city for things in terms of planning and licensing, you know, aid boards on the high street, a whole host of different things which are not properly enforced, not effectively enforced. And yet we're giving them more work to do, but not actually substantially increasing the number of enforcement officers that we're employing. So I think you've got this little bit horse before carriage, as it were. We should be looking at an effective enforcement regime across the range of things which we as a council regulate, and not necessarily prioritising this one area over others. I accept that the council motion was passed and it needs to be addressed, and that's all well and good, but let's not lose sight of the fact that it won't work unless we properly increase the capacity and the energy of the enforcement process itself.
We are increasing to 2 members of staff enforcement rather than 1.5. So it is actually 2 members of staff. I don't know if Sim wants to say anything, and then I've got James.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yes, we are looking to appoint an assistant enforcement officer to support the enforcement officer in their role. So they will be a full-time post. So it will be 2 officers.
Okay, so there'll be 2. Sorry, I misheard you. I'd written down here half-time post when you were talking earlier on.
Yeah, just picking up on the last point, I think if we as a council take a sterner approach on this now, yes, you know, we hear what Councillor Gregson is saying with regards to it's only 1, possibly 2 areas. I think by taking, I represent an area where this isn't an issue, but who's to know where we're going to be in the future? Some of us represent wards where this isn't an issue, but by taking a sterner approach now, are we not actually setting a precedent, actually ensuring that it doesn't become a widespread issue across the city, or wider a wider issue across the city, thus freeing up our enforcement officers' time.
Yes, from experience at other authorities, it certainly is the case that if you do pursue if you do have a particular problem area and you do take action, affirmative action against them, people who are breaching, and it becomes well known that the council will actually pursue, in this instance, a prosecution where there's multiple offences taking place, then the message does go out and it does actually have an impact and a knock-on effect and actually reduce the overall problem. And I have worked, and that is in relation to other authorities which have exactly the same issue, in fact, an awful lot worse than yourselves, in that they were bigger university towns where this was a very, very big problem.
Thank you. In that regard, Mr. Manley, I think that a press release might be quite useful in alerting the public to what's going on, and you know, hopefully the press will help us to enforce it, or rather prevent the need for enforcement in the first place. But also, I think that I wonder if this is a matter for scrutiny or for audit. We do already monitor planning enforcement in any case.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I suppose the point I wanted to add to the discussion is that in common with many other areas of the council's business, because we're a small council, we must align our resources around your priorities. That's clearly how we must work. The first step of that is increasing the complement of enforcement officers and making sure that how that team is managed, they're empowered to make a range of decisions that really deliver some results on the ground. And Sim and I are working on that, and recruitment and training and a set of tools will help with that. And I appreciate that you'll want to measure us in terms of results and demonstrable change out there. In the short term, what we can bring you is a revised enforcement policy. We're going to bring that back to this committee for you to have a good look at where we're prioritising our resources and the issues which happen at a ward level, which, you know, with the basis of your knowledge, really are the aggravating problematic issues, again, to make sure that we've got our priorities in the right place. And then I suppose beyond that, I suppose at this stage, Councillor Agar, I suppose I'd question the remit of another committee to scrutinise what's clearly within the remit of this committee. I think there's something for this committee to hold us to account around enforcement and for planning committee to be updated. I'm not quite sure I can see the audit and governance angle at this stage. Obviously, if we're unable to deliver some improvements, then I think that's perhaps where we would then look to explore that further. And then I think the last point is the budget we have currently is the budget we have, and that's what we're working with. And if you have a political priority in the future to make a further investment in that, then that's part of the budget setting process. Well, I mean, this committee is now a full committee. Perhaps in the past it has only been a subcommittee. So this committee must report and highlight the way things are going. So I would certainly agree that with Simon that a further report needs to come back to this committee with performance as well as any other recommendations that this council will maybe recommend. Owen. Sorry.
Councillor Agar stole my thunder. I was going to suggest publicising this with a press release, because we know this 14 days, and these landlords know full well the 14 days, but the public don't necessarily know that. So the more we can publicise it, the better.
So Any other questions? If not, then
Can I just check, Chair, just so
Yes.
for clarity, because
So
I welcome the view if we're going to have a further report, and I do think taking on board the comments
yes,
that
because
those
we need
members
to
have
make a
made,
recommendation.
that we ought to add that we receive a further report to monitor progress. But I am also seeking assurance that we're going to work with, if I can put it, those established organisations in the city that clearly relating to these two West Side wards at the start of this programme, they are mainly student accommodation. So there's a logic for working with the university, and speaking to the university, which we did in terms of their union, they do recognise that students access property through a different means. So what I'm seeking is a proactive approach of engaging to try and reduce the necessity for these boards, which doesn't really exist at the moment in this report. Do you see what I mean? So I'm looking for a proactive approach.
How would you like?
That we receive a further report and
Yep.
that we look as an authority to engage with the relevant partners and stakeholders to reduce the proliferation of these boards. Because I'm looking for a proactive nature of that, not simply with the people who are putting them up. I think that the university may have some ideas in relation to that, but it's for them to come forward.
So we agree that the first part of the recommendation, and then to receive a further report with stakeholders and partners input into
I think I'm looking to work with stakeholders and partners to remove or reduce the necessity for these boards, and to seek a further report in due course on the progress of the council's measures. So we can track progress. Is it working? Is it not? If it is working, fantastic. If it isn't, then we'd have to revisit what our tools in the toolbox are.
right. So would you like to recommend?
I've just set out the wording, I suppose, that would be sensible.
Yes, if you recorded it. Yes, that's lovely. Yes. Okay. So are we in agreement? Yeah? Yes? And Margaret's all right with them? Okay. So now we go on to Christmas in Worcester update, which is Helen, I think.
Evening all, thank you very much for having me. It's Christmas and Worcester update, which seems appropriate on the hottest day of the summer so far. But the background of this is that at the PED committee in June, members requested an update regularly on the progress with the Christmas fair, Christmas lights and the Christmas market in December. And you'll remember that the Christmas fair, as reported at the last meeting, runs from the 2nd to the 5th of December. And follows its traditional Victorian fair format with street entertainment and stalls, and local retailers encouraged to trade from outside their shop fronts. In addition to this year we're adding a new Worcester Christmas market, which runs from Monday the 6th of December to Thursday the 23rd, and we'll have 25 to 30 wooden chalets in the high street. The stalls would be dressed and lit to add to the festive atmosphere. And we'll be promoting this to residents and visitors through the Christmas in Worcester campaign. So those wooden chalets will also be in place throughout the Victorian Fair as well. So to bring you up to speed with activity so far, update on this report. So now we're at about 85% of available stalls which have been booked. And those have been confirmed by Cotswold Markets, who are the market operator for the event. There's a large number of previous attendees and several new stall holders, and that's looking really nice, they're making very good progress with that. We have now procured the hostile vehicle mitigation barriers as required for an event of this scale. So that will be in place for the Victorian Fair only, not the Christmas market itself. The Worcestershire Safety Advisory Group is meeting in just over a week from today. In 2 weeks, in a week from today. And we will be updating partners, including the police, fire, West Midlands Ambulance, about plans for the event and working in partnership with them to ensure safety at that event. Coach marketing is underway. We've put several adverts in group travel publications, including Coach Tours UK, the Women's Institute magazine, and Group Travel Today. We've also started calling all of the coach providers that we've worked with before to get some progress and update on them about their intentions for booking at the event. At the end of August, we had still only received 62% of the coach bookings that we would normally expect to have received at that time. So this stands as a risk and we're monitoring the progress with that, hence calling all of the coach providers over the next few days. Initial inquiries so far indicate that some coach companies are planning to book but haven't yet. Also, some research that we've carried out shows that coach companies are advertising their coaches for the event, even though they haven't necessarily booked with us, and that's completely normal. That's what we would expect to see. So they're waiting to see what their market is doing before they book their places with us. We've put in place a number of measures to mitigate the risk for this, including being able to reserve the services of the police and the stewards at a later date than normal. And we're continuing to work on that and update the risk report on an ongoing basis. In other areas of the event, we've booked the fun fair for the Core Market car park, which is always popular with both residents and visitors. And we're working with Worcester Cathedral to confirm details of the opening ceremony event, which will take place on Thursday, the 2nd of December. The next plans for us are to now commence promotion of the entertainment opportunities. We've started contacting schools to book the choirs on the stage, and also we're starting to engage with professional entertainers to book our entertainment schedule as well. So in summary, plans are proceeding as normal, but with caution and with mitigation measures in place to prevent any concerns. And I'll come to more on the risk management shortly. But just before that, I'll just update on the Christmas market, which is the wooden chalets. The installation will take place in the week leading up to the 1st of December. Working with the chalet hire company at the moment to confirm the locations of all of those stalls. Those stalls are about 75% booked now, which is fantastic for the month. Some stall holders will be at the Victorian Fair as well, and some will be coming in on the Monday fresh for the 3 weeks of the market. And again, we are working with local entertainers and professional entertainers to put some entertainment and activity on each of the weekends that are between the Christmas fair and the Christmas actual weekend. And obviously the purpose of it is to encourage visitors to the city and remind them to shop not only in the chalets, but also in the local businesses who are here all year round. In terms of risk, so just to reiterate some of the work I've already talked about, we've got stringent risk management procedures. So we've got our standard risk management in terms of health and safety risk assessments. We will also be enhancing this with reference to COVID-19 and any other public health advice at the time. As well as reviewing the risk of cancellation and restrictions which may be imposed on the event due to any public health concerns. The kind of things that we're monitoring for that are coach numbers, public sentiment and feedback. So we'll be monitoring things like social media comments, public health advice and partner agency advice, as well as supplier feedback as well. So there's quite a comprehensive piece of work going on behind the scenes continually over the next few weeks. We're also investigating insurance, both for ourselves, our suppliers, and also for any traders as relevant. And we've secured agreement from Cotswold Markets that they will refund traders should the event be cancelled at short notice. So we've managed to work with them to support that. So in terms of Christmas lights, this year we thought it was worth an update because we're at the end of our previous supplier contract. So we've got new suppliers this year. It's a company called Light Limited, who can very highly recommended from other authorities. So their concept for the scheme for Worcester has been designed to reflect the traditional and historic nature of the city centre, as you would expect. And we have some new, what they call Twinkly Pro LED mini lights. which will be located in some of the trees in the city centre and are programmable, so that you can schedule activity at different times of the day, different on the hour, every hour. And the idea of that is that it will attract people to look at that display when it's happening. So, and hopefully keep them here longer as well. The remainder of the scheme is the gold and silver Christmas angels and stars. And there's lots of opportunities for cross-street displays, and it will be twinkling throughout the day, gold and silver lights. The cathedral roundabout will have the traditional 35-foot Christmas tree dressed in warm white lights. And then this year, the existing large tree that's on New Road roundabout, there's two large trees, one of them will be dressed. So instead of putting a 35-foot Christmas tree on New Road, we're dressing the existing tree. And then we're putting a feature decoration on the middle of New Road roundabout to add some shape to it. And that's in response to a couple of things. Firstly, one is the challenge of actually decorating the tree on that roundabout. It's traditionally very challenging anyway. And the other one is to provide a sort of a new welcome to St John's and provide a point of interest. And then St John's will have their Christmas trees above the shops. I think it's 35 or 40 Christmas trees that they have above the shops throughout the main street and the secondary street as well. So, oh, and then the only other update about Christmas is that the Christmas light switch on will take place on Saturday, 27th of November. And this year, for the first time, that will be an all-day event where we will have entertainment throughout the day with the traditional switch on at 6 o'clock in the evening once it gets dark. So we're hoping again to use that as part of our recovery efforts to encourage people to the city and to stay with us throughout the day and obviously shop in our local businesses, eat in our local restaurants and cafes. And then, as always, the activity will be promoted through the Christmas in Worcester campaign, which will promote to both residents and wider region as well, the wider afield. So, any questions?
Thanks, Chair. Helen, in terms of 5.3, the risk management item, we spoke about this at committee in June, I know. Just so we get a sense of where this will go from here, where costs cannot be met, etc., where previously agreed and currently being scoped out. Is there a firmer sort of timescale for this at the moment, or is it will this come back to committee at a later stage?
Yeah, thank you. So we are anticipating that we'll meet that within existing budgets. As it stands at the moment, it will come back to committee if it's in addition to that. It's very much an ongoing process because obviously things are constantly changing and we're securing supplier information on a pretty much daily basis. So more than happy to update, as and when, obviously, as well.
I was going to refer to 6.4. I don't believe we have a cathedral roundabout anymore, Helen. Has any thought been given to putting the tree in Cathedral Square?
Yes, I have considered that. There's a couple of issues. It's not impossible, and other places do it. The challenge for us would be the structure. So actually, we wouldn't want to be digging into the roundabout and embedding the tree in it. So there's a huge challenge then with putting a tree sort of on a flat surface. It's not impossible because of the places do it, including Liverpool and other places that I've seen. Part of the other reason for me is that with the fact that we use the square so much, especially now with seating, and there's no sign that will change over Christmas. They're expecting that will stay there. We've also got stalls there during the Christmas fair and activity on there during the weekends leading up to Christmas.
Thank you. Can I just add to that answer? I do recall many years ago when we first completed the square, we had an officer who had come to us from Leicester, and she pointed out that in Leicester they were planning to put their Christmas tree in their square, and why didn't we do the same thing? And very shortly afterwards, having the conversation, Leicester had to close their tree off and barricade it because, unfortunately, people were getting rather overly celebratory, having too much of the festive spirit within them, and trying to climb up it of an evening. And ever since that time, I've thought that the best place for the tree is somewhat out of harm's way on the island. Officers and members will know that over the years we have suffered some vandalism, particularly in St John's with the tree. And sadly, I think the more difficult it is for people to access the tree and climb up it for whatever reason, the better, unfortunately.
I can remember when it used to be a regular event on New Year's Eve to go off the tree. I just wanted to thank Helen for the update and the information. I think a few months ago, we were all very uncertain as to what was going to happen, whether this would actually be successful, whether we would have any sort of Christmas festivities here. And it all looks to be coming together really well. And I'd just like to say thank you, Helen, for bringing us this. And I think it's very positive. It looks as if it's going to be a good December for Worcester, good for Worcester people, because it'll be very, very celebratory, but also good for all our traders, be they in their little wooden chalets or in the shops. And that's got to be a good thing.
I certainly was interviewed on free radio about the summer, so congratulations. So I've got James, Jim and Simon, and then Helen.
I was somewhat worried then when Councillor Hodges started to talk about the tree. I thought you were going to declare an interest for a second then, but yeah, it's just a quickie. Obviously, we're seeing in these sort of COVID recovery times, supply costs are increasing an awful lot. It's good to hear that the road safety barriers are in place. Has there been an immense change to costings on that? Is there anything generally across the board with regards to costings that are a concern?
In terms of the hostile vehicle mitigation, it's around the same price as it has been in previous years.
Thank you, Chair. Just in relation to a brilliant report, and I think we're all very glad to see that hopefully the Christmas fair is moving forward now, and we've got new operator, the additions in there, and I think it builds confidence, as the members have said, that this event will hopefully take place and to be a key event in our calendar again. It's in relation to the lighting, and obviously technology moves on, doesn't it, all the time, what you can do to really animate the street scene. And my plea would be that we look in time to do that in the St John's area as well, because St John's is an important trading area, and we want to make sure that area feels as attractive and welcoming really for residents and visitors alike, as we're doing in the city centre. And I know the mini Christmas trees are one solution in terms of having them on the shops. But they're not as animated, if I can put it like that, as some of the lighting that we are suggesting in the city centre. So whether we can have a look at whether it's possible to make them even more attractive and inviting to residents and visitors alike to come to St John's to spend some money there as well. I would just add that, Chair.
Hello, Helen. Thank you for your report. I'm really excited by Christmas lights, I love them. But I'm going to agree with Simon, but actually I'm going to fight for the tithing and Barbourne Road, because we've got a lot of independent shops along there, and it'd be really nice if the lighting could extend even a little bit to encourage people out on that linear stretch for shopping. Along the tithing and Barbourne Road, we've got a lot of independent shops which would have loads of Christmas gifts. I think it'd be a really good opportunity to get people out of the city centre, maybe spend some time on some pubs and bars along there as well, just spread out for people, which of course is good for COVID as well. Thank you.
Okay, thanks all. In terms of the additional lights, anything's possible. We can get quotes and we can have a look at budgets, and we're obviously really willing to put them wherever, but everything carries an additional cost. So we squeeze as much as we can every year out of our current budget. So I'm more than happy to have other conversations about where we might find additional funds for that. And then it was just to add to, just to respond to Joe's point really, which is to give a shout out to the team, because it's, you know, there's a team behind me, including Michelle, who are working really hard on this project for the city. So, you know, whilst I'm sitting here presenting, it's not all on me, it's on others as well. So.
Thank them for the summer, the elephants and the other exhibitions and festivals and everything else, plus the Christmas fair and Christmas and that sort of thing. So well done. Any other queries or Pat?
Yeah, I'd just like to endorse Councillor Lewing's comments, because I do think that if we can do something for the tithing and Barble, that would be great, because I think they get ignored rather a lot.
Well, budget. Perhaps we need to maybe increase the budget maybe for next year. Yeah. So
Lucy.
we note this recommendation. Oh, sorry, Owen. No.
No, it's along those lines, because people are talking about budget, and clearly if the costs of installation or sourcing the relevant equipment are going up, if that's pressure on inflation, then I think it is something, because I think the Christmas lights and events like the Christmas fair are key things within the calendar, aren't they? And so we've got to make sure that they're adequately resourced. I think there's also opportunities through new technology and the evolving, you know, lighting products. So what I'm suggesting, and I think Councillor was suggesting, is looking at whether we can we stretch the budget any further, really? And if we can't, then that's clearly something we'll have to see as part of the budget setting process. But I would endorse, as well, I think we both agree, making sure that we properly animate those other areas of the city that are really important to the communities that we serve.
The charge of 4,400 update.
Yeah. Not yet, Lucy.
So Michelle.
Hello everyone. Yeah, Charter 400 update. The recommendation is that the committee notes the planned activities to celebrate the 400th anniversary of the Charter of James I. The background is this year marks the 400th anniversary of the Charter of James I, which incorporated the city and established a mayor. Although many of the rights existed since 1189, the Richard I Charter, this charter is widely recognised as creating the city of Worcester. In July 2020, the PEG committee approved the reallocation of the tourism enabling budget to fund recovery projects, including an allocation towards the delivery of the Charter 400 celebrations. Local organisations have been invited to get involved by sharing the logo, strapline, web links and other promotional and social media activity. For information, in December 2020, a Charter 400 working group was established consisting of representatives from the Worcester Heritage Partnership, City Council Tourism and Events Team, Museums Worcestershire, Archive and Archaeology Service and the Civic Society. Key activities to celebrate the anniversary include the following. So we've got charter merchandise, pin badges and tote bags for sale in the Tourist Information Centre. Discover history of created bespoke charter tours that have been running since April. We got involved with the Worcester Show. We included some charter themed classes in the schedule. And we also had a charter stall at the show to promote the year. Worcester Festival created a unique, humorous play and entertaining look at the main events in Worcester over the past 400 years. They performed at 3 sessions during the Worcester Festival, and pretty much all of them were at full capacity. So the play went down really well. And we are planning on repeating the play on the 2nd of October. We are currently in the process of installing an Edward Hoodman blue plaque. Edward Hoodman was the first mayor of Worcester, and his tomb is in All Saints Church. We've partnered with the Civic Society and All Saints Church, and we are currently going through the process to get faculty approval to put the blue plaque on the pillar outside All Saints. This is also opposite the spot where his house once stood, so it's a very appropriate position. We've commissioned the creation of 2 pewter bowls. Edward Hoodman bestowed 2 silver bowls to the city in his will and expressed the wish that they are used when the council met. The bowls have since been lost, and Wentworth Pewter have created replica bowls, and we are now hoping that it is the intention that these will be used in a ceremonial way at 4 council meetings. They will be unveiled on the 2nd of October. We have also commissioned 3 unique artworks, a tapestry, an enamel hanging sculpture, and a large infographic timeline of the past 400 years. And we are currently now gearing up for the Charter Day celebration on the anniversary date, which is the 2nd of October. This day will include commission art displays, the exhibition of the Royal Charters, which we are planning to install mid-September in the foyer in the Guildhall. The Charter Day will also include a reading of the Charter, a variety of stands of local history and heritage societies, and work by local school children. Additional walking tours of key sites and the chance to sample a specially commissioned charter ale will hopefully be available. Guests will be invited to a civic event early evening in the Assembly Hall, and this will include the opportunity for all past mayors to be officially photographed to mark the occasion. Worcester Cathedral are hosting an organ recital in the evening performed by the organist of St Paul's Cathedral, Simon Johnson, and will include music from Thomas Tompkins, the organist of Worcester Cathedral at the time of the signing of the Charter. So that activity is obviously extremely relevant. Some of the wider engagement that we've kind of picked out across the city includes the following. Free Choirs Festival. We had 3 events during the festival that were specifically linked to the Charter celebration. There's a new St Peter's Heritage Trail that has been installed, and they're highlighted points of interest from the early 1600s to the present day. We've been working with Know Your Place and Worcester Bid and created a charter trail with posters for local businesses in the city centre that are connected to buildings connected to the founding members. Perrywood School are delivering a range of activities related to the Charter on the 1st of October, and that will involve the entire school. The University of Worcester are delivering a series of lectures on the 9th of October on different themes ranging across the 4 centuries. And we've kind of connected with Malvern Hills Brewery, who've created the bespoke charter ale, which was on sale at the IWA festival a couple of weeks ago and is currently on sale in the Cardinal's Hat. Just a couple of things just to add to that. We've also launched an essay competition. We are working with the operations team to organise a tree planting event. We are hoping to plant 400 mixed broadleaf saplings to honour the anniversary year. The location for that hasn't yet been confirmed. And we've also commissioned a videographer and photographer. Charlie has been out on site and has started kind of filming aspects of Worcester this year. We've got the Elephant Trail, the Worcester Show, the Drumhead Service. He's also filmed the recorder Judge Burbridge reading out a full transcript of the Charter. And then he's planning to film some of the Discover Histories tour, obviously be present on October the 2nd, film the blue plaque and Edward Hoodman's tomb. And then we're hoping to connect the Victorian Fair with the Charter celebrations by having a bespoke reference made during the opening service. And we are working with the Twinning Association as well, who are creating a booklet. Thank you.
Can I just add that we also have the tours taking place in the next couple of weeks. I know many members are taking the opportunity to attend those, and the leadership team will also be attending. May I just add that Sally booked my evening, so the fact I'm attending the evening of the 20th, and I'll miss you, Alan, it was nothing to do with me. Okay, but I hope you, those of you that are going, have a good experience, and some feedback would be really good. So hope you enjoy it. Thank you.
The third thing that you didn't mention was that there is a photograph being made of each of the mayors in gosh, yes, the former mayors. So that's on that Saturday. So that's a nice touch as well. So I think there must be a good 20 people. So that should be good. I must have been, yes. Any other questions? No? If not, can we note that report? And that concludes tonight's meeting.